The Indianapolis Colts may be on break for the summer, but fans still have plenty of questions about the 2024 season. How will things shake out at wide receiver? Will the Colts sign a veteran safety? And how will the new kickoff rules affect Indianapolis? Well, we'll answer all of that and more tonight. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast presented by Fan Nation on SI.com, part of the Fans First Sports Network. My name is Andrew Moore, and as always, I'm joined here by my fellow analyst and co-host at Horseshoe Huddle, Drake Wally. Drake, we're officially in the dead part of the offseason, and when I say dead, I mean dead. Literally nothing happening on West 56th Street. The players are gone. The coaches are enjoying a little bit of time off as well. But fans still have a lot of questions. So tonight we're going to be taking any and all Colts questions from you guys, our loyal listeners. And Drake, I think it's going to be a fun conversation tonight, just based off of some of the questions that we gathered off of X already. There's going to be some fun topics discussed tonight.
Yeah, and chat, if you guys have questions you didn't get pre-show, please throw them in. We will get to them as soon as humanly possible. Of course, we will address the ones that were sent to us before the show first. But yeah, we're going to answer as many as possible because it's a good thing when you have so much promise, so much hope, and just so much potential on an entire roster from top to bottom. And there's always going to be questions with every NFL team, but right now, the questions for the Colts aren't, how are they going to do this? How are they going to do that? How are they going to address this? It's what can we expect? What's the mark that you want some of these young guys to hit? Who's going to start over who? There's a lot of competition in multiple positions, man. So they're good questions, not, who's going to be the quarterback? Who's going to be the coach? Not stuff like that. So that's something to really be excited about. And hey, I'm excited to address some of these because we got some pretty damn good ones already.
Exactly. So tonight we're going to address all of your questions. We haven't done a fan Q&A session in a long time. So we thought, it's the dead part of the offseason. Might as well start it off and do one of these before we dive into our position breakdowns that will take us throughout the summer and right into Indianapolis Colts training camp. So we did get some questions off of X earlier today. But like Drake said, if you guys didn't participate on X, don't worry. Make sure you throw your questions in the chat after we get through the ones that we got earlier in the day. We will tackle all of the questions in the chat until either you guys don't have questions anymore or we reach the hour mark of our stream here. So if you haven't done so already, before we get started, please go ahead and follow us on all of our socials, like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow at Colts on FN on X, and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. Hit that bell so you know when Drake and I go live every Monday and Thursday night so you never miss an episode. And if you can't catch us live or on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you listen to podcasts, we're on there as well. So make sure you subscribe, give us a 5-star review so we can reach other Colts fans just like you. We already have quite a few people in the chat. DSG Goodbar, happy Monday to you as well. Sean Contright says, hey guys, go Colts. Good to see you. Sarah in the chat as well. Hey, Andrew Drake, I hope we get a free safety. I started my new job today. We'll hope everything went well with your new job, Sarah. And thank you for joining us tonight as usual. We have the GOAT, Logan Schmidt, in the chat already with a question. Which tight ends make the team and what's the depth chart order? Well, Logan, that's actually one of the first questions we're going to address tonight. So you already have a sneak preview into one of our discussions. So Drake, let's dive right into it. And one of those, the first question, we might as well start with Logan Schmidt's question. It's kind of because as Logan is a regular listener to the show, so is Stats Matt. And Stats Matt actually gave us this question. He can't be here tonight because I guess his daughter has a softball game. So understandable. As dads, we get it. But still, do better, Stats Matt. Yeah. But yeah, as we'll answer Logan's first because it's literally the same question. The first part of Stats Matt's question. So Drake, which tight ends make the team and what is the depth chart order? So I'm going to have you let you kick this thing off because you actually just posted a piece on horseshoehuddle.com literally, I think, within the hour on the tight end position for the Indianapolis Colts. So take it away, buddy. What do you think the tight end depth chart looks like and which tight ends make the team? How many end up making the final 53-man roster?
Man, this is a really difficult question to answer because it's arguably the most competitive and stacked position group. And I don't think we were really thinking who's going to make the roster when you didn't think Drew Ogletree was going to return. Talking about a guy who started 9 out of 12 games last season when he was on the field. I mean, they wanted him to start, so they had him out there. So I think that it's so hard to say. I think that if we're talking about the top 5 guys, if there's one guy that might be the odd man out, it's such a lame answer, but it's Mo Alley-Cox. I think he is on the final year of that. I think it's a 3-year, like $17.75 million deal. Obviously, that's more money than he deserves. But as Noah Jaber mentioned on a couple different episodes, if they wanted to cut him, they would have done it by now. So I think that he's probably the odd man out, though, because I think that they're high on Mallory. I think they like Granson's abilities, and they're high on him. And I think that they're the highest probably on Jelani Woods and Drew Ogletree, because Jelani Woods has the highest ceiling, and he's athletically freakish. And then Drew Ogletree can block like hell. So I think Mo Alley-Cox is the odd man out, but I do think that it's all going to hinge on Woods. Okay. If he's healthy, it's probably Jelani Woods. Then I'm going to say Drew Ogletree. Then I'm going to say Kylan Granson and Will Mallory to kind of fight out that tight end 4 spot. But boy, oh boy, it's really difficult to say Mo Alley-Cox isn't going to be on the team because, like Noah said weeks before, they would have cut him by now if they didn't want him. Clearly they want him. So
This is a much more difficult question than you may think, because Drake, I kind of agree with Noah there in that, if the Colts wanted to cut Mo Alley-Cox, they would have done so by now. And I just don't see them doing it, unless something changes. I think Mo Alley-Cox is on this team this year. And he is, from everything that we've heard, Mo Alley-Cox is still the leader of this, of this team, or of this tight end room, I should say. So are you really going to take away the leader, the elder statesman in that tight end room? I don't think so. And Mo Alley-Cox still brings a really good blocking element, to this team. So when you talk about that, then it becomes a numbers game. And I think Mo Alley-Cox is safe. I think you're probably thinking Kylan Granson is safe. He's been running with the ones. Obviously Jelani Woods has been making a big statement throughout the spring, and he looks to be good. The Colts have mentioned numerous times talking about Will Mallory's upside, and he's likely the replacement for Kylan Granson after next season, because I don't think Kylan Granson will be back with the Colts, just because Will Mallory, you have basically Kylan Granson just in a cheaper form in Will Mallory, and probably a little bit faster too. So if you're looking at an odd man out, to me, I think it's Drew Ogletree. Because yes, he did show the promise, but as far as all the other tight ends, he certainly had the least amount of production of any of the tight ends last season. You look, Kylan Granson, obviously, Jelani Woods didn't. Now, Jelani Woods didn't play, so he didn't really have any production, but Will Mallory had more production than Drew Ogletree, and so did Mo Alley-Cox. So if that's the case, and you see Jelani Woods really come on, I think Drew Ogletree could be the odd man out. So I do think that at the move tight end, I think you're probably going to have Kylan Granson initially as the starter, and then you're going to have Jelani Woods kind of be that guy that can play in line, and he can be the move tight end. He's going to end up being, in an ideal world, your tight end 1. You're going to want him on the field the most, and then you have Mo Alley-Cox is probably that backup blocking tight end, and then Will Mallory as a backup move tight end. And realistically, you could see Drew Ogletree be the odd man out. I know he has a lot of upside, but I just don't see this Colts team keeping 5 tight ends on the active roster. I think it's almost roster malpractice to be able to do that, because there's still, you have to be able to have depth at other important positions as well. So when you're looking at this, I think the locks are Kylan Granson, Jelani Woods, Will Mallory, and then I think Mo Alley-Cox probably gets the nod over Drew Ogletree. And unfortunately, the Colts may have to let a guy with some really good upside go. But it's a good problem to have some really good tight ends, in a tight end room that you can go 4 and 5 deep.
Yeah, and this is also a unique offense where you could still have a great tight end who's if Jelani Woods pops off, you still could use a nice group behind him because you're using the ground game. Everything's predicated on Anthony Richardson, who, by the way, likes to target those tight ends. Is Jelani Woods going to be the best blocker? Well, guess what? If he can be a great red zone target and receiver, and he's a so-so blocker, maybe you keep Mo Alley Cox, so he's the blocker. So it's a good problem to have, like you said, at tight end. I think it's a unique position to have a depth, too much depth at. But yeah, we'll see. Because again, Drew Ogletree also missed his entire rookie season with an ACL tear.
Exactly. So really good question, Logan. Really appreciate it. Like I said, it was the first half of Stats Matt's question, so we're definitely going to use that first. But appreciate the question as always. And our friend across the pond, Lindsey Mack, is joining us. Good to see you, buddy. Lindsey says AR likes Granson, but he didn't have Woods. Looking forward to a breakout season from Woods. And if Woods gets going, and if Shane Steichen can put him in those positions to succeed, Woods really realistically could have a breakout season regardless if he missed all of 2023. But kind of in that same vein, Drake, the second part of Stats Matt's question was, what do you think about the depth chart for the wide receiver position and how it ends up, assuming that everybody stays healthy throughout camp? So since you took on tight end first, I'm going to take on wide receiver. I think wide receiver is a little bit easier to talk about. I really think that it's going to be 6 guys. The Colts wanted to go 5 to 6 deep last year, and they just weren't able to do it. And I think they learned their lesson, rotating practice squad guys throughout. And it just was hard to really create a connection and a bond with that group. So, the top 4 are locked in. You have Michael Pittman Jr. as your starting Z, and I would assume that Ashton Doolin would be the backup Z there. In the slot, you have Josh Downs as your starter, and rookie, the 5th round pick, Anthony Gould, I think, is your backup slot. And then you're looking at the X wide receiver position, and that one's the big competition. I do think that Alec Pierce probably enters the season as the starter at X with Adonai Mitchell nipping on his heels, and I think probably towards the end of the season, by the time we get to the end of the season, Adonai Mitchell, while he may not be listed as the starter, Mitchell's the one getting the majority of those snaps at the X wide receiver position. So in my opinion, there's not really a battle there, like a battle towards the back end of this wide receiver group. I think it's really those 6 guys that are locked in, and each one of those guys is going to play a really crucial role for this team. So it's going to be hard to really knock any one of those guys out of there. But what do you think, Drake?
Yeah, I like that because it's for me, it's Michael Pittman Jr., then it's Downs, then it's currently Pierce, and then it's Mitchell. Then you kind of have Doolin, and then you've got Gould, or really you could have Gould then Doolin, because Doolin's more of a special teams guy, and I think that Gould could probably be used more in Steichen's offense, given a fully healthy wide receiver room than Doolin right away. So I do like what you said though about Pierce starting off the season as as the guy who is the wide receiver 3 in the starting X on the other side, because he blocks in fantastic form. We still haven't seen him with Richardson during the regular season, which during camp we saw the ability to connect with Anthony Richardson and really stretch the field. And you hit a couple deep passes like that, a defense starts to really get timid, and then you get underneath and you can start running the ball, throwing short, really expanding that game plan. So I think Pierce absolutely has a role on the team, but also Mitchell is one of the most athletically freakish receivers I've ever seen the Colts draft. So his route running, his overall ceiling, I'm sure the plans they have for him, it's probably going to be him in that wide receiver 3 spot at the end of the season. But make no mistake, man, when it comes to running downs and when it comes to still maybe a big red zone threat where you need 10, 12, 13, 14 yards and you have to throw the ball, Pierce is still that 50-50 go up and get it guy. He still runs blinding fast. He's just nowhere near the technician or route runner that Mitchell is, and probably doesn't have the hands either. So, I mean, Mitchell's got glue-like hands, just like Josh Downs. So I think that's the one to watch, but definitely look out for Gould too, because while he'll probably have a gadget type of appeal for the offense, I think that as far as a returner, that's where Gould's going to make his bread.
I agree. And that's why I always hate for wide receivers, doing a wide receiver 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah.
because Alec Pierce, if Alec Pierce is or AD Mitchell is wide receiver 4, doesn't mean they're not going to see the field,
Oh yeah.
because these guys are rotated in on a regular basis. So if you want to do it based on like snap percentage, you could go that way, but this isn't Madden, guys, where your top 3 wide receivers are out there for 100% of your offensive plays. That's just not how things work in the NFL. So let's look at our next question, going to the defensive side of the ball. Drake, this one was off of X from Jack Rizzo. We've seen Jack in the chat here a few times, and he says, how likely is it that the Colts sign a free safety? Drake, in my opinion, I think it's 50-50 right now. I think that the Colts, if it was me, I would still look into guys like Justin Simmons and Quandre Diggs, guys that could, will come in and elevate your defense. But I can also see why the Colts might not want to do that. They want to give Nick Cross a shot and find out once and for all if he can be a starting safety for them for the future. And give him every opportunity to do that. However, you've got injuries to Daniel Scott once again. Michael Tutsi, we'll have to see how significant his injury is. Colts have not placed him on IR as of yet, but he did go down in mini camp with a non-contact injury. But so your safety group is a realistically an injury or two away from being in dire situations in terms of depth. So if it were me, I would go out there and I would look to bring in a safety, because you have plenty of cap space to do so. So I would be big game hunting for a guy like Justin Simmons to add to this defense. But for as far as what the Colts are going to do, I think it's completely up in the air, and it wouldn't surprise me really either way at this point if they signed a safety or if they just went into training camp with what they have and saying, we want to see what Nick Cross can do, and we want to push Rodney Thomas a little bit to see if he can re-enter the starting lineup.
Yeah, and great question from Jack, because the Colts are in a unique issue when there's never been more. I can't think of an offseason where there was more talent available at safety. Let's say that they don't go and get Nick Cross and they put all their marbles in Rodney Thomas. All right, he goes out there, falls apart. Daniel Scott goes down. You would have probably seen Justin Simmons or Quandre Diggs on the roster at this point, because it's so important. You can't just give it to Rodney Thomas. Well, you have Nick Cross. You traded up to get him. He's freakishly athletic. He just was not ready for the limelight. And then last season, he really didn't start either. He played more, but he didn't really start. And I don't even think he eclipsed 40 tackles. So he wasn't on the field that much. I think that after you have to pull him the first year, you kind of slowly push him in there the second year. They got to let him loose, people. They have to let Nick Cross try to be the starting free safety. And I think, don't forget, I know he's old, but they were interested. They showed, I guess they worked out, or they met with Kareem Jackson, who I know he's like 34, 35. Maybe they don't go that old, but I see them picking a depth guy up. There's still plenty of talent that can shore up the depth, but I don't think that they want Nick Cross to sit anymore. You're going into year 3, man. What they invested in him and just kind of where they want him to be, even if he is young, bro, you're going into year 3. You got to show it. They can't just sit him anymore. So while it would be great to have Simmons or Diggs, I just think the Colts are in a position where they have Julian Blackmon. Good. Strong safety is good. I think that you need to see if Nick Cross can be that free safety.
Exactly. And so far it looks like that's what they are going to do. But again, there's still a long time before the regular season kicks off. They could go into training camp and go into the preseason games with Nick Cross. And, then if things start to tumble, they could make a move then. The Colts, just because training camp starts doesn't mean the Colts are going to stop looking and won't make a move. This could happen all the way up to the beginning of the regular season. Stats Matt had another question earlier today, and this one's a good one. Moving a little bit over to special teams, Drake. I'll let you take this one first. What do you think happens at kick return with the new rules for the Colts? Remember, new kickoff return rules. Chris Ballard even mentioned it this offseason a couple of times, how they were really going focusing in on how to, how to really take advantage of these new kickoff returns, because they feel like it's another opportunity really to score and put points on the board. So what do you think? How do you think the Colts are really going to, use this roster? Who do you think is going to be the kick returner, and how do you think things shake out for the Colts with these new kickoff rules?
Man, it's so intriguing to think about Dallas Flowers getting another shot at this, but I think it will depend on how much playing time they forecast him getting at cornerback. Because in all seriousness, you don't want an important starting level player returning kicks too much, just because it doesn't happen often, and you can get them hurt, and then your whole game plan goes out the window. So I think that it will depend on where Flowers falls. Can he beat out Jalen Jones? Can he get starting reps at corner? If not, maybe you see him split and you get two returners out there, him and Gould, because you're going to have everybody bunched up. And while, the defense has a great chance to stop you early, they also have a really good chance to miss one tackle and you're gone. There's no one in front of you anymore. So I think that two guys is intriguing, but Brian Mason, I think that they're really high on Anthony Gould, man. He played fantastic when it came to special teams. I think he was mostly kick returner or mostly punt returner, but that doesn't mean anything, man. The rules have changed. They're going to put him anywhere they can have him returning the kick or the punt. So I think that it's going to be Anthony Gould, but I don't think anyone can sleep on Dallas Flowers because he was absolutely fantastic in 2022, has incredible athleticism, but that was also pre-Achilles tear.
Yeah, and it's going to be between one of those guys, and really the reason why the Colts drafted Anthony Gould was, first and foremost, his special teams ability. That's what they talked about in the post-draft presser, and then they said, but he can also play some wide receivers. So, and when we heard from Anthony Gould after the draft, he said, with these new kickoff rules in the NFL, it's almost like a glorified punt return, because you don't have guys running full speed at each other anymore. They're starting much closer together, so more blocks can be set up. So in that vein, that makes me think, and I really do think that it's probably going to be Anthony Gould that gets the return role, not only as a kick returner but as a punt returner as well. Now, do I think Dallas Flowers will push him for that? Certainly. I think he's probably got a lock on the punt returner, because the Colts really don't want Josh Downs back there. They want Josh Downs to be playing on offense. But when you have a guy that's as electric in the return game as Anthony Gould, and you drafted him primarily for that, you're going to take every advantage and give him every opportunity to go out there and score and make an impact in the kickoff return. So the Colts are certainly placing a heavy emphasis on it this offseason, not only with the players that they are acquiring, but it seems like they're putting a lot of thought and a lot of resources into schematically how to get returners free and really how to take advantage of this. So my opinion, I do think that Gould will be the returner, and I think that we're going to see more breakaways and more returns than we're used to in the past. And if Anthony Gould can take some of that magic that he had in college into the NFL, it could be pretty exciting for the Colts. Another question here, this one from Wyatt Law, and this is a really interesting one. I see Wyatt's already in the chat, but this is a really good question, kind of thinking outside the box. Despite concerns with our secondary personnel, I believe Ballard has built a more complete roster than most teams have, all while being one of the youngest teams in the league. So in your opinion, who has a better constructed roster than our Colts? It's definitely a big question, Wyatt Law, to kind of go through. I don't know if I want to name all of the teams, but I do think that the Colts probably have, I don't know if I'd say top 10 roster at this point, but I'd probably say, maybe around 10th to 12th, as far as the overall talent on the roster. And until this team can go out there and prove that they have made improvements and made strides in the offseason, do I think that they can climb higher than that? Certainly. But I think overall, you're probably looking at a roster that, as of right now, I would probably rank between 10th and 12th in the NFL in terms of overall talent. But Drake, what do you think?
Oh man, I think that with which rosters are better constructed, I think that one that stands out to me, because just for the sake of time, and it's just because it's in the division. I mean, I think the Texans are maybe not the youngest, but putting Danielle Hunter after his best season as a pro on your football team, replacing Jonathan Grenard, who is not even close to Danielle Hunter, and then you put Stephon Diggs on the team, and you put Joe Mixon on the team. I mean, they added even more depth on the interior with Will Anderson and CJ Stroud and just everything else. I think that is a very intriguing roster, but it also has the potential to not really change much of what they did last season too. As far as, maybe they come right down to the wire anyway. So I just think when you look on paper, the Texans, they had an impressive offseason, but I love what the Colts have done with sticking to their guns, retaining Zaire Franklin. I mean, extending him, retaining Michael Pittman Jr., just getting guys like A.D. Mitchell, putting importance on surrounding Anthony Richardson with protection and weapons. And even going back to Anthony Gold, you're talking about a guy that has literally almost the same build, speed, and allure as a returner as Nyheim Hines, which the Colts haven't had a returner of that magnitude since Nyheim Hines. So they've put an importance on youth, on development. I think they really trusted their eyes as opposed to what everyone else wanted them to do. A la Will Fries, Nick Cross. They trusted what they saw. So I think it's an intriguing roster. But like Andrew said, I like what he said. It's right outside of the top 10 until they can put something together consistently. Come talk to me week 10, 11 when let's hope Anthony Richardson stayed on the field the whole time and Jelani Woods actually suits up. There's just too many question marks right now, but I do think that as far as on paper and what their potential is, they're just outside the top 10.
We have our first super chat of the evening here, and it's from the good man himself, DSG Goodbar. Thank you so much for the super chat, buddy. Really, really do appreciate it. DSG Goodbar with a really good question here as well. Colts went 1-2 to end the year with 0 turnovers in those 3 games forced by the defense. What can Gus do differently to finish stronger, and who do you think can be their closers? So this is an interesting question here. As far as what can Gus do differently to finish stronger, I don't know if Gus himself, I don't think the Colts defensive scheme is going to change much. I don't think the Colts are going to blitz. I think what the Colts are really relying on is just their players another year in this system. I think they're relying on Charlie Partridge to get the most out of the defensive line group that they already have. And they're relying on these young cornerbacks to take a step. They're relying on Juju Brents to take a major step forward, Jalen Jones to take a step forward. They're relying on Nick Cross to take a step forward, better communication within the secondary, which Drake, you and I talked about it, last Thursday was one of the Achilles heels for this defensive unit. So in my opinion, I just think, they need to be just a development step. I think that's how they can finish stronger, is just everybody taking a step forward in their play. And then I do think that having Charlie Partridge in the defensive line is going to have a bigger impact that people think. I think his ability to get guys in the right position and get the most out of his players, we're really going to see that. And having multiple pass rushers and multiple defensive linemen that can really have an impact, it's just going to keep the rest of that group fresher as we get into December and January. So I think that could play a role in there as well. But in terms of closers, in my opinion, you look at your stars, you look at your DeForest Buckners, you look at your Zaire Franklins. I think Zaire Franklin could do a better job of forcing some turnovers. You're hoping Kenny Moore can continue to do that. Having Julian Blackmon healthy, certainly having Leatu Latu there and Kwity Paye, Samson Ebukam taking a step forward in their pass rushing. So that way, these quarterbacks don't have all day to throw on these final drives. Really just get after the quarterback, I think, can really help close up these games. But Drake, what do you think? How do you think that the Colts defense can adjust here? Whether it's Gus Bradley changing something or it's just development of the players? And then who do you think will be the quote unquote closers for this defense?
Yeah, I agree with the Gus. What can Gus Bradley do differently? You got to think when he first came into this gig, Nick Cross, first off, doesn't pan out as a starter. And then Stephon Gilmore, who you're not anticipating to be your best cornerback, is your best cornerback. And then there's just, all the wheels fall off. Well, then you get a very young defensive secondary. You lose Dallas Flowers. You're hoping Darrell Baker Jr. can be that guy. He gets burned. Juju Brents plays half the season. Jalen Jones, while he did step up and overstepped his draft stock or where he was picked, he still wasn't, he still got put on his plate a lot more than they were wanting. And then you got to mix in that the Colts did not get consistent pressure. And, that they had games where they had 1 sack, 0 sacks, then 6, then 6 again, and then 1, and then 1. There was just a lot of inconsistency, but there's a lot to love there too, because Dio Dangbo, career high in sacks, Kwity Paye, career high in sacks, Samson Ebukam, career high in sacks, almost had 10 sacks, and was second on the team in pressures behind only DeForest Buckner, who, by the way, also had 8 sacks. Only team in the NFL with 4 players with 8 or more sacks. Okay, so there's a lot to build off of there. But as we've said on the show, 2 things are huge for the defensive line. They brought in Charlie Partridge, and I know that a coaching change doesn't always, especially positional, doesn't always, ring everyone's bell. But it's interesting because they didn't get rid of anybody. They kept everyone intact, which means they loved the guys. They just needed different coaching. Then you add Laiatu Latu, who's arguably the best pass rusher in the draft. So I think that the defensive line is incredibly promising. They just have to, kind of like we said before with the rest of these predictions, you got to put it down. You got to make it happen. You got to put consistent pressure on the quarterback, because last year it was a bad combo. Lack of consistent pressure mixed with an injury-riddled secondary and inexperienced. That's not good, and you're facing some pretty hardcore players out there like Devontae Adams, Nico Collins. I mean, there's guys out there that can destroy a team that has that problem. So I think that those are moving in the right direction to smooth out. And I'm intrigued. I don't really think Gus Bradley could have done anything different. I just think he needed more experience and more pressure from the front.
I think, in a perfect world, the Colts want their closers to be that defensive line. They want their pass rushers to be affecting the quarterback and getting after the quarterback on every single play to end these games. And then they're hoping that pressure, can really force these quarterbacks into some mistakes, so that way the Kenny Moores, the Juju Brents, the Julian Blackmans can take advantage and seal the deal with turnovers and interceptions, or at least forcing incompletions. So great question, DSG Goodbar. Thank you again for the super chat, buddy. Really, really fun one to talk about. We haven't really talked about defense so far today, but that's a really good question. Thanks. Appreciate that a lot. We'll do one more here from Stats Matt before we dive into some from the chat here. And this one is also a guy from talking about a guy that we haven't talked about much throughout the spring. Stats Matt is asking, any word on Evan Hall at minicamp? So from everything that I've heard about Evan Hall is that, the knee isn't bothering him, which is a great sign. He looks back to normal, but it does seem like he is entrenched as that, that third running back, the pass catching back per se, because obviously, Jonathan Taylor as your bell cow. Trey Sermon has really been the one that is the running back too. When Jonathan Taylor missed those couple of days dealing with some personal things, Trey Sermon was the one getting the majority of the first team reps at running back. So as of right now, it looks like it is Jonathan Taylor 1, Trey Sermon 2, and then your pass catching back is Evan Hall, followed closely by Tyler Goodson.
Yeah, and that's who I was going to say is, Tyler Goodson, he had a really rough break last season, right? I know that he didn't catch the ball, and if it touches your hands, they say you got to catch it. But man, when it's behind you, you got to twist your body around. I think I put that more on the quarterback. So Tyler Goodson has a lot more ability than people think, and he has a better fit than people think with Shane Steichen's offense. And if you read our own Zach Hicks's piece on Tyler Goodson, he does a little bit of a deep dive. There's a lot of reasons, and you'll understand why they're high on Tyler Goodson. So Evan Hall is in a little bit of a rough spot right now because Trey Sermon has played with Steichen before in Philly. He had probably his best season as a pro last year, even though he wasn't really starting, kind of like San Francisco wanted him to when they drafted him. But then you got Tyler Goodson, who, while he had that awful play, him and Trey Sermon carried the team against the Steelers. They really did. They were pretty much like Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor against the Browns. They just had almost equal carries, and they were just bludgeoning the crap out of the Steelers. So they proved they can be the running backs in an offense, and that was with Gardner Minshew. Okay, so I think Evan Hull, once he gets fully healthy, I think that you're going to see him you're going to hear more about him. But right now, man, he's still recovering, and he really hasn't shown much. But rest assured, the guy is probably still the best receiving back on the team, and he's an underrated blocker in pass pro. So there's probably still a spot for that guy on this team, rest assured.
Oh yeah, and he's gonna be involved because as of right now, the Colts don't really have outside of Tyler Goodson a true pass catching threat at the running back position. Evan Hall can really fit that bill. And here's kind of on the same vein as that, kind of going off of the depth at running back. CJ has a really good question here too. At running back 2, which do you feel is more important, a pass catching running back or a running back that typically just runs the ball? And I think for me personally, obviously you want a player that can do both, because if your one running back isn't much of a threat in the passing game, then you bring him in and teams are going to capitalize on that and say, oh, well, they're not possibly going to pass it to him because he can't do that. Same thing with if you just bring a guy that can only really catch the football and isn't a threat to run between the tackles, it's going to be a tell to the defense as well. So you typically want that guy to be a little bit more well-rounded, but also a change of pace. I think it's the guy that you have the most trust in, that when Jonathan Taylor needs a break, and let's face it, guys, the Jonathan Taylor is going to get 80 to 85% of the snaps at the running back position when he's healthy. So we even saw that last year with how good Zach Moss was. When Jonathan Taylor was healthy, he was the bell cow, and Zach Moss's snaps deteriorated very, very quickly. So when you're looking at a running back 2, you're looking for a guy that can continue to just keep the offense rolling, keep the running game going while Jonathan Taylor is taking a break. Or if Jonathan Taylor does go down in that situation and misses a game or two, you're obviously not going to have the production that you have when you have an all-pro running back like Jonathan Taylor out there, but he can still be serviceable and keep the ground game going. So I think, as of right now, earlier in the spring, again, the Colts have just more faith in Trey Sermon to do that, to be that guy that can back up, be the change of pace, come in and keep the ground game going when Jonathan Taylor needs a breather. That's not to say that Evan Hall, if he has a standout training camp and standout preseason, he can't take that role over from Trey Sermon, especially if Trey Sermon struggles. But as of right now, Trey Sermon is that number 2 back because the Colts feel like when he comes in, he can continue to really put pressure on that defense and keep that running game going at a better clip than Evan Hall can. So again, we'll have to see how everything plays out, but that's why I think that for the Colts, that's why they have Trey Sermon as the running back 2 more than Evan Hall, even though, Evan Hall may have is much better as far as catching the football. He's probably looking at your third down running back role. Trey Sermon is definitely your running back that you can rely on in between the tackles. And as we saw in games like the Raiders game, he certainly has some juice to him as well.
Yeah, and when you're talking about which would you prefer between the two? I mean, it also depends on how many weapons do you have to throw to that aren't running backs. I mean, dear God, remember the Giants? I mean, they had literally Saquon Barkley. So it was very important that he could receive the ball because otherwise they'd be screwed. So I think that when you talk about the Colts, you look at Jonathan Taylor, he's obviously not a super duper, efficient pass catching back, could probably work on that, but he's going to get the 3 carries out of the 4, hypothetically. You're going to get then there's going to be more role players and stuff. But as Andrew said, when you have Taylor taking a breather, if it's 3rd and 5, you want that receiving back. If it's 3rd and 1, you want that guy who maybe can pass catch a little bit, but like Trey Sermon, he's also compact. He can hit that hole and he can hit it with some velocity. So I think that you want as complete of a running back as you can have. But I think if I'm picking between the two, I'll probably take the running back that runs the ball more than pass catches, just because it adds more to your offense. And I think you can also play action off of it more.
Wyatt Law has a really good point about this that I failed to bring up. Pass blocking by your running backs is very important as well. Oh, certainly, if you're going to be throwing the football, you can't have a running back in there that isn't going to block, or is going to be a liability in that area when you're trying to protect your franchise quarterback in Anthony Richardson. So that definitely it's definitely taken into account as well. Here's another question from the chat, Drake, and I found this one to be a little bit interesting. And Wyatt Law again, which is just Wyatt Law's having a really good episode here, coming up with some good comments and good questions here. And this one back to the defensive side of the ball. Does Ronnie Harrison continue at will linebacker or move back to strong safety? Jalen Carlies, the rookie out of Missouri, should supplant Ronnie, in my opinion, at the will linebacker position. So, Drake, what do you think? Do you think Ronnie Harrison is going to end up sticking at linebacker for the Colts, or do you think he moves back into a safety role, kind of where he originally entered the NFL as a safety?
I think that they're probably just going to keep him at linebacker because they brought him in, then they converted him over. I don't think that they want to exclusively convert him back, but he also played some safety last year still. So maybe he's that hybrid guy. Maybe he's more of a utility role. I think that Jalen Carlies is the guy they're higher on. I think that they also are looking at, Cato June. You had 5 interceptions in a season as a linebacker. Well, here is almost your clone, so coach him. I think that they're really high on Carlies, but I do still think Harrison has a role in the team. Maybe it's more special teams. He was able to change his body to get to that linebacker role and put on some weight. So I don't think that he would be, out of the question to continue to be a cover linebacker because maybe him and Carlies are both out there, on 3rd and long because they both used to be safeties. So I think he's got a role, but I do think if he stays at linebacker, he's going to be behind Carlies, and then only if they need an emergency safety will they put him back there.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a competition to be decided in camp. Yeah. I don't think that Harrison is going to go back to safety unless it is an emergency situation or unless he absolutely has to. The Colts want him to play linebacker, and obviously your starting will in all this is EJ Speed. EJ Speed is still the starting will linebacker and will be the starting will linebacker for the Colts. You got Speed, and then obviously Zaire Franklin at the mic. If the Colts do go three linebackers, and a 3 linebacker set, that's when I could see Rodney Harrison potentially being the Sam linebacker there. And then obviously on those passing downs as a dime linebacker, it'll probably be between Harrison and Carlies. Both of those guys are going to play special teams regardless. It'll just be, who ends up battling for and is on the field more for those defensive snaps. I think it's going to be the guy that can display he can take the ball away, display that he's better in coverage. Whoever does that is going to win that dime linebacker role and really be out there on those coverage snaps. So that's one battle that it's not a huge battle in terms of a guy that's going to play 100% of the snaps, but it's definitely a battle to watch in training camp. And guys, the Colts drafted Jalen Carlies for a reason, to be a coverage linebacker for them and to generate more turnovers and more plays in the passing game in the second level of the field. We have one more question from Stats Matt that I do want to get to here before we move on. And this one moves also on the defensive side of the ball. Drake, what do you think the defensive line rotation looks like for this season? And I think this one, honestly, you could go so many different ways with this answer. But if I had to choose for week one, I think you're still going to have the same starters as last season. Samson Ebukam is going to be at the Leo. You'll have DeForest Buckner at the 3 technique. You'll have Grover Stewart at the 1 technique, that nose tackle position, and then Kwity Paye is the big end. However, I think that if you're looking at that second group to come in, I think Laiatu Latu is going to be at the Leo. You're going to have Raekwon Davis as the nose tackle. I think you could see, Adetomo Adebawore as the backup 3 technique, and then you're probably looking at Dio Dangbo as the backup big end. You can also see Dio Dangbo go inside to be a 3 technique and have Tyquan Lewis come in to be that big end. So the Colts can do a lot of really interesting things with this defensive line rotation. They have 8-9 guys now easily that you can continually rotate in and out. I mean, when you look at guys that could ascend, obviously Latu's at the top of the list. If Latu, gets going, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he takes over that starting Leo spot. The Colts want when you use the 15th overall pick on somebody, you want to get him out there on the field as quick as possible and get him as many reps as you possibly can. And if Latu continues to impress, he's not just going to be a guy that's in that second group and in pass rushing situations. Latu is going to find himself in the starting lineup as well.
Yeah, and this is such a great question to bring up because it's going to be a massive part of the entire Colts game plan and probably the most important part of their entire defense, because it all starts and ends in the trenches. And generally, whichever offense or defense wins that, the most wins the game, or at least they push and they're right there at the end of it. So I think that the guys who really need to watch for Latu's potential emergence are both Ebukam and Odengbo, actually, because Odengbo, I absolutely love Dio. I think that he has so much power, but he is a liability to a degree in the run game, and he is not finesse. He is pretty much all just raw power. So I think that Latu has the nimbleness to be almost like Samson Ebukam, be that quick win, that constant pressure type of defensive end, but he has the size of Kwity Paye to be a turnstile and just stay right there on the edge and stop the ground game. So he's going to definitely emerge at some point. But yeah, right out of the gate, I still think you have to give the starting position to Ebukam. He played his ass off last season. I think that, Buckner and Stewart are the obvious ones, but then Davis and Adebaware, I think, are going to occupy the roles behind them. I think Taven Bryan either finds himself on the outside looking in, or he'll be on the practice squad, or just won't make the roster. But then, you also have to talk about Tyquan Lewis. He's going to be one of those rotational guys, and he's not going anywhere. It's a good issue to have, especially last season when you were lacking pressure. It's a good issue to have when you have too much depth. For tight end, it was a little weird. For this, you got 4 or 5 spots you can put on the field, so you can really keep a lot of these pass rushers. And it's going to be hard to cut some of these guys, because even guys like, Laulu and Avery, if they can somehow start to impress, maybe they find themselves with a depth role. So I do think that Latu, man, though, he's going to emerge at some point and somebody's going to get their snaps cut out.
Latu just brings the entire floor of this defensive line up tremendously, because not only do you know what you're getting with him as a rookie, you're getting a guy that's going to put consistent pressure on the quarterback and find ways to get to the quarterback just because of how detailed he is and how polished he is as a pass rusher. But it's going to push every single player, especially every single edge in that Colts locker room, to get better, because if they don't, Samson Ebukam, I'm sorry, you had a great season, but you're also only being paid $8 million a year. So, if that's the case, it's not like you're this $20 million pass rusher that is going to be benched and go to a reserve role. Kwity Paye, yes, you got your 5th-year option picked up, but that just means that the Colts are giving you another year to show what you're worth. You have to continue to step up. Otherwise, that 5th-year option, your Latu is still going to start over you. Dio Odengbo, you have to not only pass up Latu, but pass up Kwity Paye as well to show that you are viable enough for a starting role. So it's going to push all of the top edge rushers already for the Colts and push them to try to take their game to the next level, which is what you want. You want that internal competition with one another to push each other to the next level. And I think that's what Latu does for the Indianapolis Colts. NFL Nerd, kind of on the same vein, talking about the defensive line. Will the defensive line significantly improve their pressure rate? Drake, I'll let you go first here, because you already kind of mentioned, the Colts defensive line just was inconsistent as far as getting after the quarterback. So do you think that really all they need to do is be more consistent, or do you think that they will also improve at a significant rate or at a significant amount their overall pressure rate this season?
It's going to be hard to say because excuse me, I think that last season they had Buckner, Ebukam, and Lewis were really their top 3 pressure guys. Then you had kind of Quiddy Pay and then Dio and then the rest. Okay. You also have to think they didn't have Grover for 6 games. I know that he doesn't put the most pressure on quarterbacks, but he probably did more than even Taven Bryan did. And so it helps Buckner get more pressure. I also think you're getting, Quiddy Pay in another season coming off his best year with Charlie Partridge. I think that's a huge addition, guys. I think that he's going to really push to maximize the talent level of this team. And you can't rule out Leatu Latu. I mean, if he can hit his ceiling, all he did was put pressure on quarterbacks. So that's just going to help everybody else. And while the pressures weren't consistent, they did set the Indy era sack record. So they still got it done. There were just some finite details like that pressure missing, and I think the coaching. So they feel they've got both those things addressed. I think you're going to see an improvement. Significant, I don't know, because Latu is still a rookie and Partridge is still making his first jump to the NFL. So I don't know about significant. I think it's too early to have those kind of hopes, but I do think it's going to improve because honestly, even with the sack numbers, it was kind of lacking. So
yeah, I think that's where I'm leaning as well. Is I don't know if there's going to be a significant improvement in the pass rush or the pressure rate, I should say, but I do think it's going to be more consistent. So in that vein, yes, I do think it's going to improve. I think it has to. When you bring on, you don't lose anybody. Plus, you bring on Leatu Latu onto your defense, and you already know that he's gonna get, just by looking at his college film and how polished he is, again, he's gonna be able to generate more pressure than you were getting last year. So, but do I think they're gonna take a drastic jump forward? I don't know about that, but I do think you are going to see more consistent pressure. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's the Colts really didn't, when you look at the raw stats, the Colts maybe necessarily didn't need a huge across the board pressure increase. I mean, I'll look at the numbers from PFF. I mean, obviously Tyquan Lewis had a 17.1 win percentage. DeForest Buckner was 15.3. Samson Ebukam was 14.4. But then when you get down to the Quiddy Pace, 10.4. Dio Dampa was 9.7. That's kind of where you need to see those guys really step it up. I could see DeForest Buckner, with more pass rushers on the field. You could see Buckner into that 17% range. Even if Quiddy Pay takes his from a 10 to where Samson Ebukam was at a 14.4 win percentage, that would be huge. Dio Dangbo, if he can go up to a 12, and if you can see Latu in his first season go up to 14 or 15, which is where you're kind of expecting, then maybe the entire team will have it won't be a small, but it won't be significant either. It'll be a nice jump forward in that overall pressure rate. But I think it's going to be more, again, of a team effort, and you're hoping that those guys, specifically Pay and Dio, can really lock in and take a step forward as far as consistency in their pressure rate as well. Shout out to my beautiful wife Danielle for her nightly super sticker. Thank you so much for your support as always. Definitely killing it as a young mom there. So really do appreciate it. So it looks like we only have one more question here tonight, and this one is definitely gonna we're looking way ahead with this one. Wyatt Law, I think maybe this is my favorite question of the night. So and we'll hold on right before we get to that. NFL nerd coming through for stats, Matt. League average is 10.4. I'm hoping to get to 13.5% overall. Exactly. That would be a really good pressure percentage for the Indianapolis Colts. But Wyatt, this is great here. What positions should Chris Ballard address on day 1 and day 2 of the draft next April? Or do the Colts go best player available? Boy, Wyatt, you're getting way ahead of us. We haven't even started the 2024 season. This guy's already looking forward to the 2025 NFL draft. I will admit I have looked at some 2025 mock drafts, but that's just because I'm a sicko, guys. You don't want to do what I do. But if I had to pick a position, obviously I think the Colts go best player available, but so much can happen this offseason or throughout this season, to talk about to really decipher what the Colts could do. But obviously, I think safety is still up there, especially if Nick Cross doesn't pan out. Julian Blackmon is only on a 1-year deal. So safety you would have to look at. And then it's tough because, do the Colts again? Do they look for cornerback help if Jalen Jones or Juju Brents doesn't take a step forward? Do you look at, potentially look at some offensive line help? But the Colts address some offensive line in this draft in the 3rd and 4th rounds with Gonzalez and Bordolini. But to me, I think it's safety, and then you're probably waiting to see, what happens next year as far as what positions to address. But if I had to pick right now, say, and the Colts are picking, hopefully for Colts fans, they're picking number 32, but my guess would be they're picking mid 20s next year. You could be looking at potentially safety in round 1.
Yeah, I think that it would be secondary. Obviously, there's so much to think about, but if you're just firing from the hip, cornerback sounds good just because they didn't take one this time. But then maybe day 2, I will say that I don't think they really need to address offensive line. You got Bernard Ryman, then you have Gonsalves, then you've got Bortolini, and those last 2, you're probably at some point wanting them to be starters. So I think that maybe you add, depending on what happens with Odengbo, maybe you add another defensive end. Maybe you want to continue to supply Charlie Partridge after a great 2024 and 4 players with 10 or more sacks and 70 team sacks. Maybe you just want to keep giving him weapons, but it's definitely going to probably be at least cornerback. I think that they're just going to keep on trying to build that secondary because you need to be able to stop receivers in today's NFL. And last year, despite lack of consistent pressure, we did see the secondary kind of fall apart at times, especially when the depth guys were in there.
Yeah, I think you're gonna. It's really just so hard to tell what the Colts could be looking at. I mean, Buckner and Grover Stewart are starting to get up there in age. Is there a defensive tackle that stands out to you? Does Braden Smith have another season where he really struggles as far as injury concerns? Because we know when healthy, Braden Smith is one of the best right tackles in the NFL. But does he go through another season where injuries really hurt? Do you look at right tackle? It is. I think you're probably set at receiver and tight end, and running back. But offensive line, defensive line are always areas the Colts are looking for. What do the Colts do at linebacker? So it's just a lot of things have to shake out before we go into what the Colts could be doing next year. So really appreciate that. It was a fun question, though, certainly from Wyatt Law. So let's do one more, Drake. I'm looking at the chat here. I see what NFL Nerd asks. I'm not going to put that bad juju out there about that quarterback question. The answer is no. The answer is no on that. But that we might be through all of the questions. I know Lindsey Mack says Brock Bowers hasn't got a younger brother eligible next year, does he? Unfortunately not. The Brock Bowers train has crashed and burned, and he's out there in Vegas. I mean, hey, you look at Vegas, and with a tight end group of Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer, shoot, that's probably the best young tight end room in the NFL, bar none. Certainly Gardner Minshew, hopefully he uses the tight ends more than he did with the Indianapolis Colts. But I think when you talk about all of these questions, really outside of NFL Nerd, who I think was trolling a little bit, buddy, but Drake, there weren't any quarterback questions. We didn't have any quarterback questions of who's going to be the quarterback in 2024, or where do the Colts go from here at quarterback, or if Richardson struggles, does Flacco come in? There's no talk about quarterbacks, and I think if you're a Colts fan, you're just thinking about what has transpired over these past few years, and you're thankful for that. You're hoping that Anthony Richardson can be the answer that the Colts are looking for. And yes, I know that until he goes out there and proves his arm is okay and doesn't get hurt, there are still going to be questions about that. But want to reiterate everything that I've heard there at West 56th Street. They're moving full steam ahead with Anthony Richardson, and that's exciting for 2024 and beyond. And a lot of these questions are asked are optimistic of the future for the Colts, Drake. And so it's a fun time to be a Colts fan, and 2024 could be a special year for the Colts.
Yeah, and this is when you're just kind of hoping everybody stays healthy. You're just hoping everybody, meshes well with each other. It's a super young team, and Steichen, although he looked really good last season, he's still only, going into this for a second year. So I'm intrigued. I think it's the best the Colts roster has looked top to bottom. I think it's the most exciting that it's looked. I think fans haven't been this pumped in a while. And actually the last question real quick, Michael Litteken, what are the true odds of getting a safety? I think they like Nick Cross. I think that we mentioned this earlier. I think you would have seen somebody signed at this point. And if they do sign someone, it's probably going to be a veteran or somebody just to provide some depth.
Yeah, we kind of answered that one a little bit earlier in the show. I think it's about 50-50, but it seems like the Colts want to go into next season, at least training camp, to see what Nick Cross brings at the free safety position. So we'll see if we're right on all of these questions all throughout the 2024 season. So that's our show for tonight, guys. Really appreciate everybody tuning in, and appreciate everybody for asking questions tonight. Really fun episode, a different episode, but it was a lot of fun for Drake and I. Shout out to our super chats tonight. DSG Goodbar, my beautiful wife Danielle, and everybody else that joined us this evening. If you haven't done so, please go follow us on all of our socials, like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow at Colts on FN on X, and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. Hit that bell so you know when Drake and I go live every Monday and Thursday night, and for special breaking news episodes so you never miss us. And if you can't catch us live or on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you listen to podcasts, we're on there as well. So make sure you subscribe, give us a 5-star review so we can reach other Colts fans just like you. Drake, let's talk about some of the things that are on horseshoehuddle.com, because not only can people listen to us, but we'd also appreciate if you go to Horseshoe Huddle and take a look at our written work. So Drake, tell the people what they need to go check out.
So I've been covering, all sorts of happenings at training camp, and just, kind of going into depth on some of the injuries and some of the replacement guys, some of the moves that have been made. But the one that I just released is why I think that the Colts tight end room is probably the most competitive on the entire roster, just from top to bottom. Probably going to be one odd man out that's got some skills. So go check that out.
Definitely give that a read. Myself on Friday released the update about Anthony Richardson, went in depth on what he had to say and what Shane Steichen had to say about his shoulder injury, and also what Anthony Richardson is looking forward to, not only this summer, but for the season ahead. So make sure you check that out. I also have an update from Laiatu Latu as he gets adjusted to life in the NFL, how it's been the past couple of months as he's entered his first offseason program with the Colts, and what he's looking forward to as training camp is, I think, only 5 or 6 weeks away at this point, maybe seven, but guys, it's right around the corner, and Latu is certainly looking forward to his first training camp in the NFL. So make sure you check that out, as well as all the other fantastic writings on horseshoehuddle.com. Go follow Drake at DWalsterDrake. You can follow me at Andrew Moore NFL, and we'll be back Thursday night to begin our positional previews. Guys, we're going to break down every single position for the Indianapolis Colts over the summer to get you all set for the 2024 season. And we're also going to take the idea from Matthew Sundberg, and compare the Colts position group with the rest of the AFC South in each one of those positional previews. So those are going to be a lot of fun. And like I said, guys, we'll continue to bring you Colts content all summer long. So everyone, enjoy your week. Make sure you get out in that sunshine. And we'll be back here Thursday night to continue covering the Indianapolis Colts with all of you. We'll see you then.